Welcome to the Human Nature Channel. I'm your host, Alex Tamsula, and what am I doing here? Well, it's Tuesday night once again here at my dad's sensible farm garage. It is sensible. Allow me to explain. Now, I've mentioned it before, but behind this camera is a medicine chest mounted to the pegboard. And there's a mirror on the door of the chest. Now, just as a digression, this mirror plays an important role in the creation of these videos. Earlier in the day, during ass-scratching time, when I'm trying to come up with ideas to put into this video, I spend a lot of time talking to myself in the mirror. I'm talking to myself right now. It's easy to imagine hundreds of thousands of YouTubers out there looking into their cameras and talking to themselves. It's almost a dissociative disorder. And these YouTubers who are talking to themselves, well, you know that they've been talking to themselves all along, even long before YouTube. I mean, even when they were little kids with their imaginary friends, they know who they are. But then YouTube steps in, and it's as if a cloud had been lifted. Because now, technically, you're no longer talking to yourself. No, you're making a video. And theoretically, people will see this video and hear what you have to say. Oh, if you're somebody who talks to himself, doesn't have a YouTube channel yet, oh, you don't know what you're missing. I feel so much better. I only have nice things to say about YouTube. Anyway, getting back to sensible. I mean, this is a working garage. You got heavy equipment. You've got tools. You've got things with sharp edges. You got stuff like this lying around. DeWalt. You can get hurt. That's why it's sensible to have a medicine chest. Because let's say, God forbid, you're down here and you accidentally whack off your thumb. Well, what do? You run to the medicine chest and you pull it open. And there's a pack of gauze. And there's Q-tips. And you can put the gauze on your bloody stump while you look around on the floor to see where you kicked your thumb. We got a box of sandwich bags up there. We got freezers. You see what I mean by sensible? Okay. How about some Las Vegas shooting truth community yak, because that's what you're here for. How many YouTube channels devoted to the Las Vegas shooting are doing it weekly? I strive to do it weekly. I really get into it. I subscribe to a lot of the investigation channels for the LVS. I don't see a lot of weekly anymore. And there may be channels I'm not subscribed to and I'm missing. Sorry if that's the case, but I don't see it. There's me, and then there's our old friends, Jason Goodman and John Cullen, who on Friday night, I guess like around 5:30, 6 o'clock, they do 20 minutes on Las Vegas, and it's a weekly thing. And yeah, I sit down and I watch it. Okay. And it's always the warm-up for their Patreon show. And to this day, John Cullen holds on to two things. No photograph of a broken window in room 32-135 at Mandalay Bay, and nobody saw any muzzle flashes. Everything he has to say is based on that. Because I remember hearing an early video where he's like, well, no evidence of a broken window. Nobody saw flashes. Therefore, here we go into the wild blue yonder. There we go into the sky, or however that song goes. Yeah, he's off into the wild blue yonder. And it's like, you take those two things away and they're easily taken away. The shooter was a few steps back from the window. You're not going to see the flashes. And I've seen the videos of AR-15s firing their .223 ammo at night at 400 yards. The flashes are faint and they're intermittent. And no photograph of a broken window in room 32135 at the Mandalay Bay. Who cares? You would have needed a photographer with a line of sight on that hotel room broken window to see it, and I don't think there was any. So this is the kind of the Cliff Notes version of everything John Cullen has to say. Really, you take that away, he's got nothing. Here's what I find interesting about where I'm at in the Las Vegas shooting truth community. Not where I started, but some of us are aware of the charlatans out there. And it's kind of getting to the place where the action is expose the charlatans. But I can't think of another place I'd rather be. Anyway, there's always something interesting here in my dad's garage. What can I show you tonight? We'll do this picture in picture. What you are looking at is what is known as a turnbuckle. What it does is it connects two separate pieces of cable which are attached on either end of this, which is a screw device, and as you turn it, you can create tension between these two strands of cable. Now you might be asking yourself, why is that on the wall of this farm garage? Well, that is because this is an old building. It's been here a long time. It was here when we moved to the farm in 1962, so it was probably new in 1955? I don't know. It's a concrete block. And you got to understand, over the years, the ground shifts underneath the foundation of the place. The more it gets old, buildings like this tend to start to separate and come apart. So what my dad did, this would be, I guess, the southwest side of the building. He put metal plates in the corners. There's bolts. You got two strands of cable that meet at the turnbuckle, and by turning that turnbuckle, which is a screw device, he can actually pull the building back together. You've got the same arrangement on the wall in front of me. This is interesting. I have heard it said that in New York City, occasionally, you'll come across buildings that'll have straps around them. It's the exact same principle. You know, some contractors pulling the building back together. So, another fact to know and tell about my dad's farm garage. Well, I think I have everything I need. I've got a short deer antler for poking the fire. We have another DeWalt product. This time a nifty hand lantern. And what makes it nifty is you can twist the head around and it points straight up. And you can see what's going on up there. This is turning into the home shopping network. Next, we have a salt and pepper shaker set of pineapples, a souvenir from Hawaii. Next time you have a luau, invite me over and I'll bring these. I got a tape measure. A little yellow tape measure. Isn't that the cutest little old tape measure you ever did see? I have a tube of dielectric grease. In my car, I got to clean the battery terminals. I popped the hood the other day, and there is buildup. What is it? Calcium carbonate? I mean, around the battery terminals, you got to keep them clean. I saw a mass the size of Rhode Island, so I've got to clean those terminals. But after I do, I'm going to apply dielectric grease. And making his triumphant return is our good friend Irv. You know, Irv, I've been thinking with that bald head of yours, might be getting a little chilly. It's still winter after all. I'm thinking on getting Irv like a little cap. And not that it's really my intention, but it might make Irv look like you know who. Anyway, Irv, welcome back. It's time for your close-up. My archaeology of Stephen Paddock continues, and today we are going to look at something that wasn't there in room 32135 of Mandalay Bay. Paddock did not have a police scanner. Now, when you consider all the items he took up into his rooms, the snorkel mask with the hose, the spotter scopes on the small tripods, the drills and drill bits, the binoculars, the suction cup handle on the bathtub edge needed because he had a bad back, the lack of a police scanner is an interesting omission. Consider how police scanners played not only a large role during the October 1st Harvest Festival massacre, keeping the public in the know, but how the scanner traffic became a source of intense interest within the Las Vegas shooting truth community early on. It's not that Stephen Paddock wasn't concerned with what was going on outside his room. From what we have seen, Paddock had the baby monitor on the food cart outside the room door. He had a camera rigged up to the peephole of the door, and if Sleep Dep Vegas is correct, Paddock may have intended to drill a hole through the bathroom wall and insert a camera, which would have monitored the fire door on which Paddock attached that L-shaped bracket. With that level of preparation, in addition, a police scanner on during the shooting would have informed Paddock, kept him up to date on what the police were doing and how soon they'd be arriving. But for some reason, Paddock didn't think it was necessary. On Wednesdays, when I get back from my dad's, I'm usually tired, so I don't answer comments until after a good night's sleep and lots of coffee. Also, I don't want to start writing my next script until I've gone through the comments because you guys are a great source of ideas and information. So Thursday is the day the fun begins. For example, Joe Central O made a very good point when he said that Paddock had thought out very well multiple aspects of his plan. Others, he didn't think about at all, and any simple Google would have solved. Paddock could have brought more effective and efficient weaponry. He had nothing pointing to a negative result for an automatic weapon. Paddock had enough money to put a lot more hate on that crowd. And he could have kept fighting, but he didn't, and that's what gets me. Yeah, I said, that's another big mystery. Why did Paddock stop when he did? He could have kept going. Now, blowing up the jet fuel tanks would have created a lot more chaos, and maybe the reason for that could be to buy more time to keep shooting, or something else, like build his bomb. But he didn't get his spectacular explosion, and he couldn't have known the cops were going to take an hour and a half to get there. Personally, I think this was a suicide mission, and he may have thought, might as well end it now. Later, I said to Joe, that's another thing about Paddock. He wanted to create mayhem, but he stopped short of creating more. Plus, he spent a lot of time gambling early on October 1st, like he wasn't in any big hurry. He's a pendulum that swings from one side to the other. Here I'm referring to the bags of ammonium nitrate in Paddock's car found in valet parking. Obviously part of some larger scheme in Paddock's mind, but with no furnace oil in sight to combine with the ammonium nitrate in just the right proportions, it was a part of the plan that apparently got dropped. It does make me wonder, though, what Mandalay Bay does for heat when it gets chilly in Las Vegas. Paddock could have thought the hotel's furnace room might be a place where he could get some furnace oil. But since Paddock never put his bomb together, we'll never know. On the other hand, if Paddock was going to walk into the furnace room and steal oil from the storage tank, who's going to stop him? But Alex, you might say. How would he ever get that oil out of the tank? Ever hear of a siphon? He did have a hose. Later, in this vein, Joe lamented the lack of vigilance from hotel staff when it came to all those bags Paddock brought in. I said, I don't think the hotel bellhops wanted to know what was in those bags. None of our business was probably the attitude. That's hotel culture for you, and the real tragedy of the LVS. What happens in Vegas stays in your suitcase until it's too late. Getting back to the police scanner and Joe's Central O's point, Paddock could have been a lot more lethal than he was. So why the fits and starts nature of his preparation? While trying to answer that, I came across an informative article in the Irish Times titled, Search for Las Vegas Gunman's Motive Goes On After Brain Exam. I'll leave a link to it in the notes. In the article, we read, a primary care physician in Las Vegas who said he had been Paddock's doctor since 2009 and had last seen him as a patient roughly a year before the shooting, told officials he suspected Paddock had bipolar disorder, something that cannot be detected in a post-mortem. Paddock here is not being diagnosed as bipolar. However, if you've had experience with a bipolar individual like I have, I think it's fair to hold him up to experience just for comparison. My dear departed gangster girl Teresa was bipolar, self-admittedly. She could go for days all fizzy and manic, then for the next few days she wouldn't answer her phone. I don't mean this disrespectfully, but you could never be 100% sure which Teresa was going to enter the room. Usually it was the sweet, fun Teresa, but not always. Every once in a while it was the Teresa who wanted to grab some snitch and tear his tonsils out. But this could be a way of getting a handle on the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Paddock problem. If Stephen Paddock was bipolar, then the pendulum behavior is easier to understand. Maybe sometimes Paddock was feeling gung-ho to kill, and maybe sometimes he wasn't. One last thing from the Irish Times article. Here we read, the examination showed that the surface of Paddock's brain contained small spheres, which can be seen on sections treated with a stain. The structures, made up mostly of carbohydrates but also containing proteins and other components, are known as corpora amylacea. Most people would have them at that age, but not in that profusion, said Dr. Haynes Vogel. He's the director of neuropathology at Stanford University, and he conducted the examination. It's a striking exaggeration of an age-related finding. So my attitude right now is, Stephen Paddock's behavior is consistent with a bipolar personality disorder. Also, his brain appeared to be aging faster than normal. By way of explanations, it's not much, but it's all we got. When we hear about mass murderer Stephen Paddock in the media, the man who killed 59 and was responsible for the injuries of over 500 others in the Las Vegas shooting of October 1st, 2017, we are always reminded of his gambling. You almost can't escape it. He was a high-stakes gambler for many years into his retirement, we're told. Although some have disputed this by saying Paddock wasn't a whale, the nickname for a real high roller. On the other hand, Paddock claimed to his acquaintance Adam Lefevre that he was a professional gambler. But we are also told Stephen experienced a decline in his financial status leading up to the LVS, as was slipped into the 3-page FBI report on the Las Vegas shooting by way of scratching towards a motive. Questions about Paddock's money or lack thereof are never far off. Unfortunately, articles on the Las Vegas shooting when it comes to Paddock's finances are all over the map and really don't tell me much. Where did the profits from Paddock's real estate sales end and the gambling winnings begin? Or his losses? What was this financial decline the FBI spoke of? Are they suggesting Paddock feared going to the poorhouse and that drove him over the edge? Here's another question. Was Paddock's financial decline significant compared to his cash on hand? Considering that Paddock had the wherewithal to not only send Mary Lou Danley to the Philippines, but also wire her $100K afterwards, it hardly seems likely Paddock worried about going broke. The media sprang Paddock the gambler into our conscious minds like it was some kind of complete package. But here is the irony. We don't really know all that much about Stephen Paddock's gambling itself. Here is a question I can't answer. When in his life did Stephen Paddock start gambling? Did he gamble in college as a young man? That's usually when it starts. Did he gamble while he was working as a postal carrier? Or when he worked for the IRS? Or when he was an accountant to the company that would eventually become Lockheed Martin? Did he ever play table stakes? I read Daddy Benjamin gambled, and that might have had something to do with a need to rob banks. But did Stephen's gambling ever get him into so much trouble he had to do something drastic? Was he ever in hock to the loan sharks? Was he mobbed up? Some mob bosses use pilots, and Paddock was a pilot. There's this video on the LVS I've wanted to talk about for the last couple of weeks, but I kept putting it off because other things came up. So now is the time, and I'll leave a link to it down in the notes. It's an episode of Inside Edition I saw come up after I watched the Adam Lefevre interview on A Current Affair. And it's an amazingly breathless, almost frantic piece of TV tabloid news. The first words you hear are, "He was obsessed with video poker. Here's Jim Murray." Video poker has been called the crack cocaine of gambling. Paddock would sit for hours at machines here at the Mandalay Bay. He was focused and methodical. His fingers worked furiously as he played as many as 100 games an hour. On the show's episode, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Keith Abloh said, "This is somebody who moved close to Las Vegas. Why? To play video games. Okay, it happened to be video poker, but it's still video games, and most folks aren't moving to a city in order to play obsessively video games." True. Unless Paddock was playing some other game entirely. Here is something the FBI would never tell you even if it were true. Let's say, for the sake of argument, Stephen Paddock was some kind of confidential government informant for the FBI. And let's say one day in early October 2017, an agent gets the news out of Las Vegas late Sunday night about the shooting, and he has an oh shit moment. Oh shit, we contracted out to the man at the center of the Route 91 Harvest Festival massacre? I've got to bury this. I've got to remove all traces of Paddock's name from the files, and I don't even have to ask permission. Now, I'm not saying I have any reason to believe this is true, except I see something in the Las Vegas shooting that reminds me of something else. For the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, Texas, ex-Marine Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested. And when they searched him, they found a Department of Defense ID card. There's no doubt the thing existed because Jesse Curry, Dallas chief of police at the time, in his memoirs had a picture of it in the plates. A Department of Defense ID card is for civilian contractors. At the time, it could get you access to any American military base anywhere in the world. With it, you could hop a ride on a military transport plane to anywhere in the world. That is what Oswald was. He was a contractor with military experience working for the Department of Defense. If you look into Lee Harvey Oswald and his time in New Orleans and Dallas in the early parts of 1963, he was into a lot of things. One thing he did do was go to the Dallas FBI headquarters and yell at an agent named James Hosty to stop bothering my wife. The smart money is that Hosty was the FBI agent giving instructions to Oswald. When news finally reached FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover that the man suspected of killing John F. Kennedy was one of their contractors, J. Edgar more than likely had an oh shit moment. Oh shit, we contracted out to the man suspected of killing the president? I've got to bury this. I've got to remove all traces of Oswald's name from the files, and I don't even have to ask permission. The FBI is quite capable of doing a cover-up job. They've done it in the past, and they can do it today. One last thing. Why did Stephen Paddock believe he needed soft body armor, as was listed in the FIT report's inventory of the evidence in Paddock's home at Babbling Brook Court in Mesquite, Nevada? It's on page 106. That sounds more than your average retired gambler would need normally. So there it sits. Funny how the FBI had nothing to say about soft body armor. You'd think that would be right up their alley. You'd think. Well, that's it for today. Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Like, subscribe, share, throw money at me. You know the drill. Have a good one.